On the morning of October 23rd, I woke up determined to go to the factory. It had been 4 months since Miguel's funeral, and in all that time, I had never been there. Esperanza kept saying that everything was under control, that things were going well, that I had nothing to worry about. But today, something compelled me to go there. Maybe it was just curiosity. Maybe it was my motherly instincts, which rarely failed me. The factory was a 20-minute drive from our house on the outskirts of San Rafael, in an industrial area where small businesses and warehouses neighbored each other. Miguel had bought the land 30 years ago, when land was worth a penny, and gradually built a poultry factory that fed half our town with fresh eggs and chicken. When I pulled up to the gate, Pedro, the guard, looked at me in surprise. He had been working here for 15 years, since Miguel's time. "Señora Palomita, what a surprise!" He hurried to open the gate. "It's been a long time since we've seen you here." "I thought I'd check on you, Pedro. Is everything all right?" "Yes, ma'am, everything is fine. Señorita Esperanza is in the office now, holding meetings this morning." I nodded and drove to the administration building. The grounds looked well maintained. The paths were swept, the lawns were mowed, the buildings were painted. Miguel always kept the place tidy, and apparently Esperanza continued this tradition. In the reception area, I was met by Rocio, the secretary, a young girl I hardly knew. She had been hired after her husband's death. "Señora Valencia, welcome. Are you here to see Miss Esperanza?" "No, I want to talk to Benito first. Is he in the office?" "Yes, of course, he's in his office. Do you know where?" "I know, thank you." Benito Carrillo had been working at the factory for 20 years. Miguel took him on as a young man, fresh out of technical school, and over the years, Benito became his right-hand man. After his husband died, it was he who helped Esperanza understand the intricacies of production. When I knocked on his office door, he immediately invited me in. On seeing me, Benito rose from his desk with genuine joy. "Señora Palomita, how glad I am to see you. Come in, sit down. Would you like some coffee?" "With pleasure, Benito. It's been a long time." He poured coffee from a thermos on the windowsill, and we settled into chairs by the window, which overlooked the production area. "How are things at the factory?" I asked, taking the cup. Benito thought for a moment, as if choosing his words. "Not bad on the whole, Señora. Production is stable, the workers are happy, we pay salaries on time. But there is one situation." He was silent, obviously hesitating whether to continue. "Speak plainly, Benito. You know I'm not one to hide from problems." "The thing is, Señorita Esperanza has signed a contract with a new company. It's called Productos del Norte. They buy eggs from us in bulk, but at a very low price, way below market." I frowned. "How much lower?" 25%, maybe more." I tried talking to Señorita Esperanza, explaining that we're losing profits, but she says it's a long-term strategy, that they'll raise the price in the future. "What kind of company is this Productos del Norte? Where are they from?" "That's just it, Señora. I checked with my contacts in the industry. They say they don't have a very good reputation. They work with farmers all over the state, make contracts like this, and then when the growers get used to their volume, they start dictating even tougher terms. And if the farmer refuses, they abruptly cut off cooperation, and the man is left without a regular buyer." I put the cup on the table. I didn't like what Benito was telling me at all. "Does Esperanza know about this reputation?" I tried to tell her, but she said it was just competitor gossip. Productos del Norte has big expansion plans and will be a priority. "Show me the contract with them." Benito hesitated. "Señora, I don't know. Señorita Esperanza said that all contracts are only through her now." "Benito," I looked at him seriously, "this factory still belongs to me, and I have the right to know who we are cooperating with." He nodded and took out a folder of documents from the safe. "Here, Señora. The contract was signed a month ago. 1 year at a time, renewable." I flipped through the documents. The terms were really unfavorable. The company agreed to buy a certain amount of eggs every week, but at a price that barely covered the cost of production. At the same time, there were penalties for non-compliance with delivery dates and quality, the size of which shocked me. "Benito, if we don't deliver on time, how much of a penalty will we pay?" According to the contract, 10% of the value of the lot for each day of delay. "That's robbery. And what happens if we have an epidemic among chickens or other problems with production? There's no force majeure clause in the contract, ma'am. I brought that to Senorita Esperanza's attention too, but she said we'd manage, that we'd never had any serious problems. I closed the folder. Miguel would never sign such a contract. He was a cautious businessman and always said it was better to make less but steady money than to risk everything for a dubious profit. How much has been delivered so far under this contract? 4 shipments. So far, all on time, no complaints. But Senora, what worries me is that they're already hinting at the possibility of more, and our capacity is limited. At that moment, the office door opened and Esperanza burst into the room. Her face was red with anger. Mom, what are you doing here? Hello, daughter. I thought I'd check out the factory. I haven't been here in a while. Why would you do that? Esperanza went to the table and took out a folder of contracts. You don't know anything about these things. I know enough to know that this contract with Productos del Norte is not good for us. My daughter's eyes narrowed. How do you know about the contract? She turned to Benito. Are you reporting to my mother about our affairs? Benito rose from his chair, clearly feeling uncomfortable. Señorita Esperanza, Señora Palomita is the owner of the factory. She has the right to stay at home and not interfere with my work. Esperanza exploded. Mother, you haven't even shown your nose here for 4 months, and now you come here and start criticizing my decisions. I'm not criticizing, I'm trying to understand. Understand what? You don't understand how modern business is done. Dad kept you out of the business, and rightly so. These words hurt me. Indeed, Miguel rarely discussed with me the affairs of the factory, but I always knew the general situation and could give advice if he asked. Esperanza, I just want to understand why we are working at a loss. At a loss? The daughter laughed angrily. Mom, do you even know how much profit we're making now? What taxes we pay? How much does it cost for fodder, electricity, wages? I didn't say a word. Indeed, I had little understanding of numbers. That's right. Now go home and don't bother me with my work. Benito, we have a meeting in 10 minutes. Prepare the paperwork for the new batch. Esperanza, we haven't finished talking. We shouldn't have started it at all. My daughter took me by the arm and led me to the exit. Mom, I know you're bored at home, but the factory is no place for your entertainment. We left Benito's office. There were workers in the hallway, heading for a meeting. They looked at us curiously. Esperanza, you don't have to make a scene in public. I'm not making a scene. You're the one who came here unannounced and started poking your nose into other people's business. Into other people's business? But the factory is running. It's profitable. Everyone's happy. And you came here to look for problems where there are none. We reached the exit. Esperanza opened the door. Mom, I'm asking you not to come here again without my permission. You're only interfering with my work and undermining my authority in front of my staff. Undermine your authority? Esperanza, I'm your mother. That's why you're supposed to support me, not fight with me in the office. I got in the car and Esperanza stood next to me with her arms crossed over her chest. Go home, Mom, and don't interfere with my work anymore. All the way home, I replayed the conversation in my head. My daughter had never spoken to me like that before. Sure, we've had our disagreements, but for her to just kick me out of the factory in front of everyone? I was met at home by Socorro, our housekeeper. She immediately noticed my upset state. Mrs. Palomita, what's wrong? You look so pale. Nothing, Socorro, I'm just tired. Is Esperanza home? Not yet. Shall I make dinner? Make it, please. And for Rafael, too, he'll be home early from work today. I went to my room and lay down on my bed. My head hurt, and I couldn't figure out if I'd done the right thing coming to the factory. On the one hand, I had a right to know what was going on with our business. On the other hand, maybe Esperanza is right and I really don't have a grasp on current realities. Around 7 p.m., I heard the front door slam. Esperanza had come home. Soon, Rafael came in as well. I went down to dinner, hoping we could talk quietly. At first, there was a tense silence at the table. Rafael said something about working at the bank, but I could see that Esperanza wasn't listening to him. She was obviously still reeling from our morning conversation. Mama, she finally spoke, setting her fork aside. Benito told me today that you were studying our contracts. Yes, I wanted to understand. Understand what? Her daughter's voice became hard again. You think I don't know how to run a business? That I'm ruining the factory? Raphael looked at us in surprise. What's going on? What contracts are we talking about? Your mother-in-law decided to check my work, Esperanza said. She came to the factory, went through the documents, and then started criticizing the contract I had made. Esperanza, I wasn't criticizing, I was just asking questions. Asking questions in front of my employees? Can you imagine what it looked like? The director makes a contract, and then his mom comes and starts discussing it with her subordinates. Benito isn't a subordinate, he's the general manager, and he worked with your father. And that's why he should come to me with questions, not complain to you. Raphael tried to intervene. Girls, maybe we shouldn't get so heated. Esperanza, Mom is not angry. Raphael, you don't understand. Her daughter turned to her husband. She's undermining my authority. I've been working like hell for 4 months to keep the factory going after Daddy's death, signing new contracts, solving tons of problems, and she comes and starts questioning everything. But Esperanza, I tried to object, I still technically own the factory, and I have the right to know what's going on there. My daughter stood up abruptly from the table. Technically, that's exactly what's formal. But in fact, who works there? Who gets up at 6 in the morning to check on deliveries? Who solves problems with workers, with suppliers, with customers? Yeah. And you sit at home, do nothing, and then come to check up on me. I wasn't checking up on you. I was just... That's enough! Esperanza screamed. Stop lying to me! You came here because you don't trust me. You think I'm gonna ruin everything. She stepped closer to me, and I could see that her hands were shaking with anger. Mom, if you have nothing to do, if you're bored at home, find yourself a hobby. Take a needlework class or something. But don't stop me from working, because it is thanks to my work that you have a roof over your head and money to live on. The next morning, I woke up with a heavy head and an unpleasant residue in my soul. Esperanza's words rattled around in my head. It was especially painful to remember her last sentence, that it was because of her work that I had a roof over my head. Did my daughter really think that? That I'm some kind of freeloader who lives off her? After breakfast, I decided to go to Remedios. My friend lived in the old part of town, in a house she inherited from her parents. There, on the first floor, was her fabric store, El Telarito. Remedios had been in business for over 30 years, knew all the local dressmakers and needlewomen, and was doing well. It took about 15 minutes to get to the center. I walked, hoping the fresh air would help me get my thoughts straight. It was a cool morning, typical for October in our region. The streets weren't crowded. The main bustle began around noon, when the stores and cafes opened. Remedios' store was located on the corner of Hidalgo Street and Morelos Street, in an old building with thick walls and high ceilings. The window was neatly decorated. Colorful fabrics, lace, buttons, and threads created a cozy picture that attracted female customers. When I entered, Remedios was behind the counter sorting out new merchandise, rolls of fabric in bright colors. Palomita! She immediately put her work aside and hugged me. How good of you to come. I was just thinking about you. Do you want coffee? I will. And we need to talk. Remedios looked at me carefully. Is something wrong? You have that look on your face. I'll tell you later. Coffee first. We went to the back room where Remedios usually received special clients and where there was a small table and chairs. She put the water on to boil and took out a jar of ground coffee. So tell me what's eating you, she said, sitting me down in the chair. I told her everything: the trip to the factory, the conversation with Benito, the dubious contract with Productos del Norte, and the scandal with Esperanza, first at the office and then at home. Remedios listened in silence, only occasionally shaking her head or clucking her tongue. When I finished, she was silent for a long time, pondering what she had heard. Palomita, she finally said. I'm shocked. Did Esperanza talk to you like that? Kicked you out of the factory in public? Yes, imagine that. And she continued it at home. She said I was living off her. That's outrageous. Remedios got up and started pacing the room. How dare she talk to her mother like that? To the woman who gave birth to her, raised her, educated her. Maybe she's right. Maybe I really shouldn't have come to the factory unannounced. Nonsense, Remedios cut her off. It's your factory, your business. You have every right to know what goes on there. I don't like what you said about this contract. She poured coffee and pushed the cup towards me. Palomita, I know this is difficult for you. After Miguel died, you put your daughter in charge of the business. You wanted to help her, to support her. But that doesn't mean you have to take your hands off the factory. But I really don't know anything about modern business. Esperanza went to university. She has a degree. So what? Remedios interrupted me. Education is good, but experience and common sense also mean something. You've been around for a while. You've seen how Miguel did business. And this company, what's its name? Productos del Norte? If even Benito, who's been in the industry for 20 years, says they have a bad reputation, then there's cause for concern. I nodded. Indeed, Benito is a man of experience and caution. Miguel trusted him. You know, Remedios continued, what if you made inquiries about this company yourself? Not through Esperanza, but on your own. You know people in the business? Miguel's friends? Talk to them. Yeah, you're probably right. Jorge Montero, for example. He's a grocery wholesaler. He probably knows this Productos del Norte. That's great. And then you can talk to your daughter with the facts. Calmly, without emotion. We sat at Remedios for another hour or so, discussing the situation. My friend urged me not to give up and not to let Esperanza treat me like this. Palomita, she said lastly, you are too kind. You always have been. But kindness must not turn into willlessness. You're a mother, but you're also a business owner, and you have a say in how that business is run. I returned home in the afternoon, determined to get to the bottom of the situation. The first thing I did was call Jorge Montero. He was an old friend of Miguel's. They had started the business together in the 80s. Jorge listened to my story about Productos del Norte and was thoughtful. Palomita, I know this company. I can't say anything good about it. They work all over the state, buying products from small producers at low prices. They promise large volumes, long-term contracts, and then they start dictating their terms. And what happens if the producer doesn't agree to their terms? They break the contracts unilaterally, and they do it in such a way that all the blame falls on the supplier. I know of several cases where people were left with large quantities of goods on their hands and no buyers. Are there no ways to protect yourself from them at all? There are ways, but for this you need to carefully study the contract. Usually they include conditions that the supplier only finds out about when it's too late. After talking to Jorge, I felt my fears were confirmed. In the evening, when Esperanza returned from work, I decided to talk to her. Her daughter was in a good mood. Apparently the day at the factory had gone well. She was telling Rafael about some new orders, laughing at someone else's story. I waited until they had dinner and asked Esperanza to give me a few minutes. Mom, if this is about last night again, I don't want to talk about it. She was immediately wary. Esperanza, I want to show you something. Can we go into the living room? Reluctantly, but the daughter agreed. Rafael tactfully stayed in the kitchen. In the living room, I pulled out the folder with the documents Benito had given me the day before and the materials I had gathered today. Esperanza, I spent the day looking into the situation with Productos del Norte. Here's a copy of your contract. I handed her the documents. And here's the information I got about this company from Jorge Montero and other acquaintances of your father's. My daughter took the papers but didn't even look at them. Mom, why are you doing this? Why are you going through my files, calling Daddy's friends? Because I'm worried about our business. Esperanza, listen to what people are saying about this company. They have a very bad reputation. Mom! My daughter stood up abruptly. Do you really think I didn't check them out before signing the contract? That I signed a contract with the first people I saw? That's not what I mean. Just look at the terms of the contract. The penalties, the prices, the terms. I know what it says. I drew up the contract myself. But Esperanza, the price is 25% below market value. And the fines. Do you know how much we have under this contract? My daughter interrupted me. Do you know how much we save on logistics because they pick up the goods themselves? Do you realize that a stable customer is better than 10 small ones who can refuse to order at any time? I tried to object, but my daughter, stability should be mutual. And here it turns out that we have bound ourselves and they can what? Esperanza's voice became more and more harsh. Mom, do you even understand how the modern economy works? The times when you could sell eggs to the neighbors and live happily ever after are over. Now you have to think strategically, sign long-term contracts, work with the big players in the market. I understand, but you don't understand anything, Esperanza exploded. You sit at home, do nothing, and then you come and start criticizing my work. You think it's easy for me to run a factory? You think I can afford to turn down lucrative offers? She started pacing around the room, waving her arms around. Do you know what the representative from Productos del Norte told me today? That they're willing to double their purchases. Double, Mom. That means more profits, more production, more workers. But with what? We have limited capacity. Capacity can be increased. Buy new equipment, build additional buildings. That's what these contracts are for, to give us an incentive to develop. I felt I was losing the thread of the conversation. Esperanza was talking about some global plans, and I was worried about the current risks. Esperanza, I'm not against development, but let's first make sure that we haven't signed a binding contract. Bondage? My daughter stopped and looked at me with indignation. Mom, did you even read the contract? Or did you just listen to the gossip of Daddy's friends? I did, and I'm worried about the penalties for late deliveries. We're not going to miss deliveries. What if there's a bird epidemic? Or other unforeseen circumstances? Mom, in 30 years of running the factory, we've never had a serious production problem. Dad has created a reliable system. I only improve it. Esperanza came over to me and took the papers. Mom, I know it's hard for you after Dad's death. I understand that you feel left out, but that's no reason to interfere with my work and undermine my authority in front of my staff. I don't want to undermine your authority. I'm just worried. Worried? Then trust me. I'm not a child, Mom. I'm 32 years old with a college degree and work experience. I've been running the factory alone for 4 months, and things are going well. She sat down next to me, and for a moment I thought she had calmed down. Mom, I know you're worried, but trust me, I won't do anything stupid. This deal with Productos del Norte is our chance to go to the next level, and what the competition says is just jealousy. Esperanza. But Benito also expressed doubts. The daughter's face darkened again. Benito is a good specialist, but he's used to the old ways of working. He's afraid of new things. And in business, you can't be afraid to take risks. But the risks must be justified. Mom! Esperanza stood up abruptly. Enough! I'm tired of discussing this. You either trust me or you don't. If you don't trust me, say so, and we'll decide what to do next. I trust you, but no buts. Either you trust my judgment or you take over the factory. Just remember, to run a business is not only to make a profit, but also to be responsible for the result. With these words, Esperanza left the living room, leaving me alone with heavy thoughts. I realized that the conversation did not bring the desired result. My daughter didn't want to listen to my arguments, considered them an interference in her work. But what upset me the most was that Esperanza didn't just dismiss my concerns, but actually gave me an ultimatum. Either full trust or she would relinquish her responsibility for the factory. After my conversation with Esperanza last night, I tossed and turned in bed all night. My daughter's ultimatum played over and over in my head. Either complete trust or she would relinquish her responsibility. But how could one trust blindly when all the facts pointed to the factory's affairs going in a dangerous direction? This morning at breakfast, I happened to overhear Esperanza's telephone conversation. She was talking to someone at work and mentioned that representatives from Productos del Norte were coming to the factory at 2 o'clock this afternoon to discuss increased cooperation. Her daughter spoke animatedly, enthusiastically, clearly anticipating this meeting. When Esperanza and Rafael left for work, I sat in the kitchen for a long time thinking. Socorro bustled around, preparing dinner, occasionally glancing at me. She had been working in our house for 8 years and had a good sense of the family atmosphere. Señora Palomita, you seem sad today, she finally said. Is something wrong? Nothing special, Socorro. I'm just thinking about business. The factory? The housekeeper paused for a moment. You know, Señora, last night Señorita Esperanza and Don Rafael had a long talk in the bedroom. The voices were loud, but I couldn't make out the words. I nodded. My daughter must have complained to her husband about my meddling in her affairs. Around noon, I made a decision. If the Productos del Norte representatives were at the factory today, I wanted to see them. Not to interfere in the negotiations, but just to form my own opinion of these people. After all, this is my factory, and I have a right to know who we are doing business with. I got dressed, grabbed my purse, and headed towards the factory. I was nervous on the way, realizing that Esperanza would be furious if she saw me there. But the feeling of anxiety for the future of our business was stronger than the fear of my daughter's anger. On the factory grounds, I spotted an unfamiliar car, an expensive, dark-colored SUV with tinted windows. The license plates were not local, so the guests had already arrived. Pedro, the security guard, looked at me in surprise. Señora Palomita, you're here again? Does Señorita Esperanza know? I won't be long, Pedro. I need to check something in the archives. He let me in, albeit with some hesitation. I drove to the administration building and parked in the far corner of the parking lot so as not to attract attention. The building had the usual work atmosphere. Rocio's secretary was sitting at her desk typing something on her computer. When she saw me, she stood up. Señora Valencia, are you here to see Señorita Esperanza? She's in the conference room right now. She has an important meeting. I know. I just want to get some documents from the archives. I won't interrupt. Rocio nodded and pointed down the hallway. Of course, Señora. The archives are in the same place. I walked down the corridor, but instead of the archive, I headed for the meeting room. The door was closed, but through the glass insert at the top, I could see what was going on inside. There were 4 people sitting at a table. Esperanza, in a business suit, with a folder of documents in front of her. Next to her was Benito, who looked somewhat tense. Across from them were 2 middle-aged men in expensive suits. One was full-bodied, with balding hair, gesticulating constantly with his hands. The other, thin, with a neatly trimmed beard, sat quietly, but his gaze was hard and calculating. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could tell from their gestures and facial expressions that they were talking about serious things. The full-figured man was explaining something fervently, pointing toward the production buildings. Esperanza nodded, making notes in her notebook. Benito was silent, only occasionally making short remarks. I had been standing in the corridor for about 5 minutes when a thin man raised his head and looked in my direction. Our gazes met through the glass. He said something to his coworker, and the latter turned around as well. Then one of them turned to Esperanza. The daughter looked back and saw me. Her face instantly contorted with anger. She stood up abruptly, said something quickly to the guests, and headed for the door. I hurried away from the meeting room, but it was too late. Esperanza jumped out into the hallway, her eyes flashing with lightning. Mom, what are you doing here? I came to the archives to get some documents. Don't lie to me! The daughter lowered her voice, but it was fierce. You were listening at the door! Esperanza, I just wanted to see who these people were. How dare you? How dare you come here during my negotiations and spy? The guests came out of the meeting room. A fat man looked at us curiously, while a skinny man frowned. Señorita Valencia, the full man addressed Esperanza. Perhaps we should reschedule the meeting? No, replied the daughter quickly. It's my mother. She's just leaving. Mother, let's go through. Esperanza took me under her arm, but not delicately, but firmly, almost painfully. She literally dragged me down the hall to the exit. Esperanza, you're hurting me. And you're hurting me. She gritted her teeth. You're embarrassing me in front of my business partners. We left the building. Esperanza wouldn't let go of my hand. Get in the car, immediately. But I drove myself. Get in the car, I said. My daughter's voice was so harsh that I involuntarily obeyed. Esperanza opened the door of my car and practically pushed me into the driver's seat. Mom, if you show up here again without my permission, I will call security and order you off the property. Do you understand? Esperanza, this is my factory. No! She leaned towards me, and I could see her hands were shaking with anger. It's my job, my responsibility, my negotiations. And you're nobody here, you're just in the way. She slammed the car door and tapped on the window. Go home, and don't come here again. I started the car with trembling hands. My daughter had never treated me so rudely in my life. She acted like a bully, not like a well-mannered girl from a good family. On the way home, I stopped several times to calm down. My hands were shaking so badly that I was afraid I would lose control. My mind was spinning. Was I really wrong? Had I turned into an annoying mother-in-law who meddled in my own affairs? But then I remembered the faces of those two men, especially the thin one with the beard. There was a kind of coldness in his eyes, calculating. I'd seen such men many times in my life, and they were no good. Socorro met me at home. Mrs. Palomita, what's the matter with you? You look so pale. Nothing, Socorro. I'm just tired. Make some tea, please. I went into the living room and sat down in a chair by the window. The last of the fall flowers were blooming in the yard, the chrysanthemums that Miguel planted every year. He liked to say that chrysanthemums symbolized constancy and loyalty. How I missed his wisdom and calmness now. Socorro brought tea and cookies. Senora, why don't you lie down and rest? No, thank you. I'll wait for Esperanza. We need to talk. She called, said she'd be late, the negotiations are dragging on. I nodded. So the meeting with Productos del Norte is still going on. I wondered what they were negotiating. And why is Esperanza reacting so painfully to my interest in these negotiations? Rafael got home from work around 6. He noticed my condition immediately. Mrs. Palomita, what's wrong? You look upset. I told him about today's incident at the factory. Rafael listened attentively, shaking his head occasionally. It's not good, he said when I had finished. Esperanza shouldn't have treated you like that. I'll talk to her. Rafael, do you know anything about this company, Productos del Norte? My son-in-law's been thinking. I've heard the name. They work with several businesses in our region. At the bank, we sometimes handle their transfers. Large sums, regular transactions, but I didn't get into the details of their business. And their reputation? You know, Senora, in banking, we try not to discuss clients, but, he was silent. But several times we have been approached by farmers asking for loans after their contracts with this company were broken. They said they were without buyers and needed money to hold out until new contracts were signed. This confirmed my fears. I was right to worry about cooperating with Productos del Norte. Esperanza got home around 9 in the evening. She was excited, satisfied. Clearly the negotiations had been a success. At dinner, she told Rafael about the grand plans for expansion. Can you imagine, darling? They're prepared to triple our purchases. That means we'll have to build new buildings, buy more equipment, hire more workers. The factory will be the largest in the region. And where will the money for the expansion come from? Rafael asked. They are ready to provide in advance, 50% of the value of the annual contract. That will be enough for all the necessary investments. I listened silently, but my mind was spinning with anxious thoughts. An advance of 50% is a lot of money, and a very big commitment. What happens if we can't fulfill the contract? Esperanza, I could not stand it. What if we have problems with production? Such a large volume of... My daughter interrupted me with a sharp wave of her hand. Mom, I don't want to discuss work issues with you, especially after today. But I'm just asking. You're not just asking. You came to the factory during an important negotiation and eavesdropped under the door. You embarrassed me in front of my business partners. Rafael tried to intervene. Esperanza, you shouldn't talk to your mother like that. Don't defend her. The daughter flared up. You don't understand what she's doing. She's destroying my work. Esperanza got up from the table and started pacing around the kitchen. Do you know what the representative from Productos del Norte said to me today? He asked who the woman was who was eavesdropping on our negotiations. I explained that it was my mother, the former owner of the factory. And he said, Señorita, if there is no unity in your family on business matters, maybe we should reconsider our cooperation. Esperanza stopped and looked at me accusingly. Can you imagine? Because of your interference, we could have lost the most lucrative contract in the history of the factory. If this contract is really profitable, why do they react so painfully to the presence of the owner of the enterprise? I objected. Because in serious business there are rules. There is etiquette. You can't just barge into the meeting room and interfere with the work. I wasn't barging in, I was just... You were spying! Esperanza screamed. Eavesdropping on other people's conversations. Socorro entered the kitchen, attracted by the loud voices. Excuse me, señores, but the neighbors might hear... Let them hear, Esperanza persisted. Let everyone know what kind of mother I have. Who can't find something to do and meddles in other people's business? These words struck me like a blow. Socorro gasped and hurried out of the kitchen. Esperanza! Raphael said sternly. You can't talk to your mother like that. How can you? The daughter turned to her husband. She doesn't understand. I've been working like hell for 4 months to get the factory up and running since Daddy died. I get up at 6 in the morning, come home at 10 at night, solving thousands of problems, negotiating, signing contracts, and she sits at home, does nothing, and then comes to check up on me. Esperanza came very close to me. Mom, if you're so bored, if you have nothing to do, get a job. Get a job as a store clerk, as a school janitor, whatever, but stop bothering me. Esperanza, this is ridiculous. Ridiculous? What isn't ridiculous? Sitting at home on my allowance and criticizing my work? I felt I was beginning to lose my temper. On your allowance? Esperanza, have you forgotten that this house belongs to me? That the factory is mine too? Technically, my daughter cut me off. Technically, it's yours. But in fact, who maintains this house? Who pays for electricity, gas, water? Who buys the groceries? Who pays Socorro's salary? She was right. After Miguel died, Esperanza took over the house. I had a small pension, but it was barely enough for my personal needs. Esperanza, I never asked you to. You didn't ask for it, but you use it. You live in the house I keep. You eat the food I buy. You use the housekeeper I pay my salary to. Raphael tried to stop his wife. Esperanza, stop. No, let her know the truth. Her daughter was already hysterical. Mom, I'm tired of supporting you. I'm tired of listening to your advice and complaints. Either you find a job and start earning a living, or I'll kick you out of this house. Those words sounded like a sentence. Socorro, who had evidently been listening at the door, reappeared in the kitchen with a frightened face. Señorita Esperanza, perhaps we ought not to. And you stay out of this, her daughter shouted at her. This is family business. Esperanza turned to me. You have 2 weeks, Mother. Either you find a job or you vacate the house. I don't intend to support you anymore. After that terrible scene in the kitchen, I didn't leave my room for 3 days. Esperanza and Raphael acted as if nothing had happened. They ate breakfast, dinner, discussed their business. But the atmosphere in the house was so tense that even Socorro tiptoed and spoke in whispers. The daughter did not apologize for her words. Moreover, she was clearly expecting me to start looking for a job. At breakfast, she would defiantly study the newspaper with ads and leave it on the table, open to the jobs page. Several times I heard her on the phone with her friends discussing my situation. She said that she had given me a chance to be independent, to find something to do. On the 4th day, on the morning of October 27th, I made a decision. But it was not the decision Esperanza had expected. I dressed in my best suit, the dark blue one I bought for special occasions, carefully combed my hair and makeup. I put all the important documents in my purse. The ownership certificate for the factory, Miguel's will, the certificates of my inheritance rights. Socorro looked at my packing with amazement. Señora Palomita, you're so dressed up. Where are you going? Business, Socorro. If anyone asks, tell them I'll be back for lunch. Licenciado Aurelio Medina's office was in the center of town, in an old building near the main square. Aurelio had been the family lawyer for over 20 years. He was the one who had handled Miguel's will, the paperwork for the purchase of the house, and the various contracts for the factory. The receptionist told me that the lawyer would be able to see me in half an hour. I sat down in a chair and waited, thinking about the upcoming conversation. The decision was final, but I realized that Aurelio would try to talk me out of it. When I was invited into the office, Licenciado Medina greeted me with his usual politeness. He was a middle-aged man, overweight, with graying hair and kind eyes behind glasses. He always inspired confidence with his calmness and professionalism. Mrs. Palomita, what a pleasant surprise. Come in, sit down. What brings you to me? Aurelio, I need to amend my will. And one more thing. The lawyer took my file out of the safe. Of course, that's your right. What changes do you want to make? I took a deep breath. I want Esperanza out of the will. Completely. Aurelio froze with pen in hand. He was silent for a few seconds, pondering my words. Mrs. Palomita, this is a very serious decision. Can you explain the reasons? I told him everything. About the conflicts at the factory, about the dubious contract with Productos del Norte, about Esperanza kicking me out of the company, and about the last threatening scene at home. Aurelio listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I had finished, he leaned back in his chair and looked thoughtfully out the window. Hey, Senora, I understand that you are upset about your daughter's behavior, but disinheritance is a drastic measure. Shouldn't we try family therapy first, or just give her time to cool her emotions? No, Aurelio. The decision has been made, but it's not over yet. The lawyer raised his eyebrows. What else? I want to sell the factory. This time, the Licenciado Medina could not hide his surprise. He took off his glasses and wiped them, clearly buying time. Mrs. Palomita, do you realize what you're saying? The factory is your late husband's life's work. It's the main source of income for your family. That's why I want to sell it. While there's still something to sell, I took out of my purse the documents I got from Benito and the articles on Productos del Norte. Look at this contract, Aurelio. Look at the terms. Now read what other manufacturers are saying about this company. The lawyer scrutinized the papers. The more he read, the more he frowned. Indeed, the terms of the contract are very harsh, and the company's reputation is questionable, to say the least. Esperanza won't listen to me. She thinks I don't know anything about modern business, but I can see that the factory is going under. And I won't let my daughter ruin the business that Miguel has spent 30 years building. Aurelio put the documents on the table. But Senora, if you sell the factory, what will happen to Esperanza? It's her job, her livelihood. Let her look for another job. She told me to do it herself. There was a bitterness in her voice that I couldn't hide. Aurelio, my daughter told me she gives me 2 weeks to find a job or she'll kick me out of the house. A house that technically belongs to me. How do you like that? The lawyer shook his head. It's wrong. Completely wrong. But Senora, perhaps we should not take such drastic measures. Let me talk to Esperanza, explain to her the legal aspects of the situation. No, Aurelio. I don't want to talk to anyone else. I want to act. I opened my purse and took out my checkbook. How much will it cost to rewrite the will and organize the sale of the factory? Licenciado Medina realized I was serious. He took out a blank sheet of paper and started writing. The change of will is 500 pesos. Valuation of the company for sale, about 3,000. Legal support of the transaction, from 5 to 10,000, depending on the complexity. Plus various fees and certificates. Do whatever you need to do. Money is not a problem. Aurelio tried again to talk me out of it. Senora Palomita, let's at least postpone the sale for a while. First we'll reissue the will, and with the factory we'll wait. Maybe the situation will change. No, I want to do it all at once. But there's one condition. What's that? Esperanza mustn't know about my plans until a buyer is found. I don't want to give her the opportunity to interfere with the sale. The lawyer's thinking. It's going to be complicated. The sale procedure requires various documents, certificates. Sooner or later, the daughter will find out. Then do everything as quickly and quietly as possible. Aurelio nodded and began to draw up a plan of action. Good. First, we need to do a valuation of the company. I know a reliable appraiser who works quickly and confidentially. At the same time, we'll start looking for potential buyers. There are several large agricultural holdings in our region that might be interested. How long will the whole procedure take? Under favorable circumstances, from a month to 3, but it may take longer. We spent another hour on the paperwork. Aurelio had drawn up a new will, naming a charity for the elderly as sole beneficiary. Esperanza wasn't even mentioned in the document. Are you sure about this decision? The lawyer asked me one last time when I was signing the papers. I'm absolutely sure. Then we discussed the details of the sale of the factory. Aurelio explained that first we need to make a complete inventory and valuation of all the assets. Land, buildings, equipment, poultry. Then we should prepare a package of documents for potential buyers. Do you have a preference for a buyer? Asked the lawyer. The main thing is that they should be serious people who will not ruin the enterprise, and that they keep their jobs. 40 families work in the factory, and I don't want to leave them destitute. I see. I'll make a list of potential buyers and start preliminary negotiations. When all the formalities were settled, Aurelio escorted me to the door. Senora Palomita, I still insist. Think again. Family conflicts can be solved, but it is much more difficult to repair a broken relationship with an only daughter. Aurelio, the relationship is already broken. Esperanza destroyed it when she treated me like a freeloader. From the lawyer's office, I went to the bank. I had to check my accounts and prepare for the upcoming expenses. Raphael worked at the bank, but I had chosen a different branch to avoid meeting my son-in-law. The bank manager, Senor Toledo, received me in his office. We'd known each other since Miguel's time. Mrs. Valencia, what can I do for you? I need to open a new account, separate from the family account. Of course, that won't be a problem. How much do you plan to deposit? I gave you a number. Toledo raised his eyebrows in surprise, but professional courtesy prevented him from asking unnecessary questions. Do you want a deposit or a regular checking account? A checking account. You may need to withdraw money frequently. Half an hour later, all the formalities were taken care of. I had a new account into which I had transferred a substantial amount of money from the joint family account. Not all the money, but enough to pay my lawyer's fees and provide for my own needs for a few months. On my way home, I stopped by Remedio's house. My friend needed to be told about the decision. Remedios listened to my story with growing amazement. Palomita, are you serious? You really decided to sell the factory and disinherit Esperanza? Absolutely serious. But that's war. Open war with your own daughter. She started the war, Remedios. I'm just defending myself. Her friend got up and started pacing the room. Palomita, I understand that you're offended. Esperanza has indeed behaved terribly, but such drastic measures. What do you suggest? To sit at home submissively while my daughter ruins the factory? Looking for a job at 58 to prove your independence to her? No, of course not. But maybe there are other ways to resolve the conflict? I shook my head. Remedios, you didn't see the way she looked at me that night, like I was nothing to her, a burden to be rid of. But she's your daughter. You gave birth to her, raised her. That's why it hurts so much. I thought I raised a kind, grateful little girl. And then I turned out to be a monster. I turned out a monster. Remedios sat down next to me and took my hand. Palomita, what will you do after the sale? Where to live? What will you live on? With the money from the sale of the factory, it's enough to live on for the rest of my life. And to live. Maybe I'll rent an apartment in the center or buy a little house on the outskirts. What if Esperanza comes to her senses? What if she apologizes? I've been thinking. Really, what if her daughter realizes her mistake? I don't know, Remedios. Too many hurtful words have been spoken. Too much pain has been inflicted. We sat at a friend's house for over an hour. Remedios tried to find alternative solutions, but I was adamant. The decision had been made, and I wasn't going to change it. At home, I was in for a surprise. Esperanza was sitting in the kitchen with a newspaper in her hands. When she saw me, she smiled for the first time in days. Mom, I've been looking at the classifieds. There are some interesting options. For instance, there's a consultant for a clothing store. Part-time, decent pay. Or here, I need a nanny for a schoolboy. Also good conditions. I silently walked past my daughter to the refrigerator. Mom, can you hear me? I'm trying to help you find a job. I hear you, Esperanza. What do you think? Why don't we go see these places tomorrow? I turned to my daughter. There was a strained smile on her face, behind which I could see impatience and irritation. Don't, Esperanza. I'll take care of my own business. The smile disappeared from her face. What do you mean, you'll take care of it? Mom, time is running out. I'm not kidding. You really only have 2 weeks. I see. Then why don't you want to consider your options? Or do you think the job will come to you? I grabbed a glass of water and headed out of the kitchen. Mom, Esperanza called me. We're not done talking. We are, daughter, we are. In my room, I sat by the window and looked out at the courtyard. Soon everything would change here. Esperanza will hear about the sale of the factory and the new will. There would be a real storm, but I was ready for it. A few days later, Aurelio called to say that the appraiser was ready to come to the factory. It was necessary to organize his visit without Esperanza knowing the purpose of the visit. How would that be done? I asked. Let's say it's a routine inspection for the insurance company. It's a routine check, nothing suspicious. The next day I went to the factory. Not secretly this time, but openly. Esperanza was on a supplier retreat, and Benito met me in the office. Mrs. Palomita, how are you? I haven't seen you in a while. Not bad, Benito. Tell me the insurance company's appraiser is coming today. It's a routine inspection. Show him around, show him all the properties. Certainly, Senora. Does Senorita Esperanza know? She knows, but she'll be busy until tonight, so you'll have to deal with me. The appraiser arrived an hour later. He was an old man in a shabby suit with a briefcase full of measuring instruments. We went around the whole territory of the factory. He carefully inspected the buildings, equipment, asked a lot of questions about production capacity and financial performance. The enterprise is in good condition, he said in conclusion. The equipment is modern, the buildings are strong. I think a full report will be ready in a week. When the appraiser left, I sat in the office with Benito for a while longer. I was sad to realize that this might be one of my last visits here as an owner. Senora, how are things going with that contract? Benito asked. With Productos del Norte? Not good, Benito. Esperanza won't listen to our warnings. You know, Senora, they have already started to dictate new terms. They're demanding a 30% increase in supply, but they won't raise the price. This has confirmed my worst fears. What does Esperanza say? She agrees. She says the volume will make up for the low price. I shook my head. My daughter had fallen into a trap, but she refused to admit it. At home that evening, Esperanza asked about the appraiser's visit. Mom, Benito said that a man from the insurance company came today. Why? A routine inspection. Every 3 years. Why wasn't I warned? You were, but you were out of town. My daughter looked at me glumly but didn't argue. It had been 2 weeks since I had instructed Aurelio to start the procedure for selling the factory. 2 weeks in which I'd been living on a powder keg, waiting for an explosion. Esperanza continued to behave as if nothing had changed. Every morning she reminded me of the need to find a job, ostentatiously left newspapers with vacancies on the table, told Rafael about her success in raising my mother. And I kept silent and waited. Aurelio called regularly to report on progress. The valuation of the factory was completed, and the figure was even higher than I had expected. Several large agricultural holdings had expressed interest, and preparations for negotiations had begun. The lawyer warned that soon secrecy would become impossible. Potential buyers would want to personally inspect the factory, study the paperwork, talk to key employees. The explosion occurred on November 10th, a Thursday, at about 7 in the evening. I was sitting in the living room reading a book when I heard the sound of cars pulling up. First one, then another. Doors slammed almost simultaneously, and hurried footsteps were heard on the path to the house. Esperanza and Rafael's voices sounded excited, but I couldn't make out the words. The front door swung open with such force that the glass in the windows shook. Esperanza burst into the living room, followed by Rafael. Her daughter's face was red with rage, her eyes glittering feverishly. "Mother!" she shouted without even saying hello. "What is this?" She was waving some papers. "What exactly are you interested in, Esperanza?" "This." Her daughter threw the papers on my lap. "Explain what it is." I took the papers and looked at them. It was a letter from one of the potential buyers, Agrocomplex Nuevo Leon. They asked for additional financial statements for the factory and a date for an in-person inspection. "Where did you get that?" I asked calmly. "It doesn't matter where. Answer me. What does it mean?" Rafael came closer, his face expressing confusion and anxiety. "Senora Palomita, a colleague from the head office called me today. He says they've been approached by representatives of Agrocomplex with questions about our factory's credit history, to evaluate the possibility of a purchase. Is that true?" I realized secrecy was no longer an option. It was time to open the cards. "Yes, it's true. I'm selling the factory." Esperanza froze as if she'd been slapped. She was silent for a few seconds, unable to believe what she was hearing. "You... what?" She finally squeezed out. "I'm selling the poultry farm. There are already several interested buyers." "You can't do that," the daughter exploded. "It's impossible. The factory is my job, my life." "The factory belongs to me, and I have the right to sell it." Esperanza started pacing the room like a caged animal. "But why? Why are you doing this? Because of our quarrels? Because I told you to get a job?" "Not just that, but because of that too." Rafael tried to intervene. "Senora Palomita, why don't we sit down and discuss this calmly? Surely a compromise can be found." "No compromise," Esperanza interrupted him. Mom, you're canceling the sale immediately. No, how not? My daughter came right up to me. Do you realize what you're doing? You're destroying the business that Daddy spent his whole life building. I'm saving it from being destroyed, from your experiments with questionable partners. There you go again! Esperanza slammed her fist on the table. It's that Productos del Norte again. Mom, the contract with them is very lucrative. For now. But what happens tomorrow when they start dictating new terms? When they demand even larger quantities at even lower prices? That won't happen. It's already happening, Esperanza, Benito told me. The daughter was confused for a moment, but quickly pulled herself together. Benito, of course, he reports my every move to you. He's undermining my authority. Benito cares about the factory, unlike you. Unlike me? Esperanza's voice has turned to a shout. I work 14 hours a day in this factory. I sleep and see development plans. And you sit at home and criticize. I don't sit at home anymore, Esperanza. I'm solving problems, fundamentally. Socorro came into the room, attracted by the loud voices. Gentlemen, shall we make some tea? She suggested timidly. Get out, Esperanza shouted at her. This is none of your business. The housekeeper retreated fearfully. Esperanza, don't take it out on the servants, I reprimanded her. Don't lecture me. You'd better tell me how you're going to cancel the sale. I don't. The sale will go through. My daughter came up to me and grabbed me by the shoulders. Hi, Mom, you don't understand. If you sell the factory, I'll be out of work. No livelihood. You'll find another job. That's what you told me to do. Esperanza unclenched her hands and took a step back. Another job? Where? Who would hire the director of a bankrupt company? The company is not bankrupt. It's being sold as a going concern. But the new owners are bringing in their own people. They won't keep me in my old job. For the first time in our conflict, I saw not anger in my daughter's eyes, but fear. Real, cold fear. Esperanza, you're young, you're educated, you have experience in running a business. You'll find a job. Where? In our town? Do you know how many businesses there are that need a top manager? 0. Rafael tried to intervene again. Mrs. Palomita, what if we buy the factory ourselves? We take out a loan, find investors? With what money? I looked at my son-in-law. Do you have a few million pesos to buy it? We'll find a way. You won't. And you know why? Because the factory Esperanza runs is not creditworthy. Look at the contract with Productos del Norte. Look at the financial outlook. Esperanza exploded again. Enough about that contract. Mom, you're fixated on one deal and you can't see the big picture. I do, and I don't like the picture. The daughter started pacing around the room, waving her arms. You know what, Mom? I forbid you to sell the factory. Do you hear me? I forbid it. You don't have that authority. Yes, I do. I run the company. I sign all the documents. You're running it on my orders, and I'm revoking that authority. Esperanza stopped dead in her tracks. What? As of tomorrow, you're no longer authorized to act on behalf of the factory. All authority is revoked. You can't. I can, and I already have. The relevant documents have been filed at the registry office. The daughter sank slowly into the chair. Her face was white as chalk. Mom, but what about business? What about the workers, the suppliers, customers? The interim manager will take care of that until the sale goes through. What interim manager? Who? Benito. He has the experience and the trust of the staff. Esperanza stood up abruptly. Benito? That old fool? He doesn't understand anything about modern business, but he understands honest business. Unlike you, that was too much. The daughter was literally trembling with rage. Are you calling me dishonest? I'm calling you frivolous and ungrateful. Ungrateful? Why should I be grateful to you? For ruining my career? For giving you the opportunity to start one. For trusting you to run the family business. For staying out of your decisions for 4 months. Esperanza laughed hysterically. Stayed out of it? And eavesdropping under doors? And the spying with Benito's help? And the meanness with the sale today? The meanness? I got up from my chair. Esperanza, the meanness was your behavior these past weeks, threatening to kick me out of the house, accusing me of living on your money. But you do live on my money. Who pays for the electricity? Gas? The groceries? Who owns the house? Who owned the factory that brought in the income to pay these expenses? The daughter fell silent. For the first time in the whole conflict, she could not find an answer. At that moment, the intercom rang. I looked out the window and saw Aurelio's familiar car. "Excuse me, it's for my business," I said and went to open the door. Licenciado Medina entered the house with a briefcase in his hands. When he saw Esperanza and Rafael in the living room, he realized that the moment of truth had arrived. "Good evening," he said hello. "Señorita Esperanza, Don Rafael." "Aurelio." The daughter was surprised. "Why are you here?" "On Señora Palomita's business," the lawyer answered, looking at me. "The documents are ready to be signed." Esperanza realized that the lawyer was aware of the situation. "Aurelio, tell her she can't sell the factory without my consent. I'm the manager." "Unfortunately, señorita, that is not true. Your mother is the sole owner of the business and has the right to dispose of it as she sees fit." "But that's insane, to sell the family business because of personal grudges." Aurelio looked at Esperanza with regret. "Señorita, the decision was not made because of personal grudges, but because of serious disagreements over the running of the business, and I must say that your mother is right in her fears." "What do you mean?" The lawyer pulled a folder out of his briefcase. "This is the information on the company Productos del Norte that I gathered at Señora Palomita's request. In the last 2 years, they've bankrupted 7 businesses in our state. The scheme is always the same. Lure them with favorable terms, force them to invest in expanding production, and then dictate bondage." Esperanza turned pale. It's not true." "Unfortunately, it is. Here are the court decisions. Here are the testimonies of the affected entrepreneurs. Your factory is following the same path." My daughter clutched her head. "But they promised. They talked about a long-term partnership." "They say that to everyone," Aurelio said softly, "until they have full control of the enterprise." Rafael took his wife's hand. "Esperanza, maybe Mom is right. Maybe we should renegotiate this contract." "It's too late to renegotiate," I said. "The decision has been made. The factory is for sale." My daughter raised her head and looked at me with hatred. "Okay, Mom, you won. You took my job. You ruined my career. Happy?" "I protected the family business from making unwise decisions." "Protected it? You destroyed it!" Esperanza stood up. "That's fine, so we'll look for work in another city. And you stay here alone with your principals." "Esperanza, there's one more thing you should know," I stopped her. "What is it?" I nodded to Aurelio, and he pulled out another document. "Your mother has rewritten her will. You are no longer the heir." Esperanza froze. "What?" "All of Señora Palomita's property has been bequeathed to a charitable foundation," the lawyer explained. The daughter slowly sank back into the chair. Her face was completely white. "Mother, you disinherited me?" "Yes, but why? Why?" "For forgetting who your mother was. For treating me like a freeloader." Esperanza covered her face with her hands. There was silence in the room for several minutes. "All right," she said at last, raising her head. "So that's it. So you've decided to punish me. For everything. For not listening to your advice. For defending my decisions. For wanting to be on my own. For forgetting about gratitude and respect." The daughter stood up. "Respect has to be earned, Mom. Not taken for granted." "Respect for your mother doesn't have to be earned, Esperanza. It comes from birth." "Not every mother is worthy of respect." Those words stabbed me like a knife. Rafael gasped. "Esperanza," he exclaimed. "How can you say that? How else?" The daughter turned to her husband. "She ruined my life. She deprived me of my job, my inheritance, my future, and all because of her ambition." "It's not ambition, it's concern for the family business," I objected. "Care?" Esperanza laughed bitterly. "Mom, if you cared about the family business, you'd be supporting me, not undermining my authority. If you made sensible decisions, I wouldn't have to stop you." My daughter came right up to me. "You know what, Mom? You won. You proved that you're in charge of this house, that you can control other people's destinies. Happy?" "No, I'm not. I'm hurt that it's come to this." "Hurt? How do I feel? I've lost everything. My job, my house, my inheritance, my mother." "You lost your mother the day you threatened to kick me out of the house." Esperanza was silent for a few seconds, then nodded. "Good. Then it's like this. Since I am no longer your daughter and you are no longer my mother, we have nothing more to do here. She turned to Raphael. Darling, pack your things. We're leaving. Where? He asked, confused. It doesn't matter where. The main thing is to get out of here. Aurelio intervened. Señorita Esperanza, Señor Rafael, I must inform you that you have 48 hours to vacate the house. That's what the law requires when there's a change of ownership. Change of ownership? Rafael didn't understand. The house is for sale too, I explained. The buyer of the factory is interested in buying the whole complex. Esperanza turned even paler. You're selling the house too? Yes, and I'm moving into an apartment downtown. But this is our home. This is where I grew up. This is my home, Esperanza, and I have the right to sell it. Her daughter sank into a chair, unable to believe what was happening. Mom, but where are we going to go? We don't have another place to live. That's your problem. You're adults. You'll figure it out. Raphael came to me. Mrs. Palomita, can't you give us more time? A month at least? To find a place to live, a job? 48 hours. That's enough time to pack. Esperanza stood up and looked at me with such hatred that I stepped back involuntarily. All right, Mother, this is what you wanted. You got it. But remember, from this day forward, you have no daughter, and I don't have a mother. Esperanza. No, Esperanza. You made your choice. Now live with it. She started to leave the room, but I stopped her. Esperanza, wait. If you don't vacate the house voluntarily in 48 hours, I'll have to go to the police. My daughter turned around. You won't have to, Mom. We'll leave on our own, and we'll never come back. One more thing, I added. You are forbidden to enter the factory. The guards have been instructed to do so. Esperanza grinned. Of course. I wish you'd let me say goodbye to the people who've been working with me for 4 months. The farewells had already taken place. Benito announced to the staff that there was a change in management. His daughter shook her head and left the room. Rafael lingered for a few seconds. Señora Palomita, he said quietly, I understand that you resent Esperanza, but this is too cruel. She is, after all, your daughter. She was, I answered, until I forgot it. The son-in-law shook his head and followed his wife out. Aurelio looked at me sympathetically. Señora Palomita, are you sure you don't want to give them more time? I am sure. The sooner this is over, the better for everyone. Good. Then tomorrow I'll file papers with the police in case they don't want to leave voluntarily. The lawyer gathered the papers and prepared to leave. Ma'am, what about you? Where will you live? I'll rent an apartment, or I'll buy a small house. With the money from the sale, I'll have enough for a good old age. What if Esperanza comes to her senses? Apologize? I've been thinking. Indeed, what if her daughter realizes her mistake? I don't know, Aurelio. Too many bitter words have been spoken. The wounds are too deep. After the lawyer left, I was alone in the large living room. The house was dead silent. Esperanza and Rafael had locked themselves in their room. Socorro preferred not to be seen. I sat in the chair by the window and looked out at the courtyard. Soon everything would change here. New owners, new routines. And I will live in a small apartment in the center of the city, alone with my principles and memories. Was I doing the right thing? That question haunted me all night. On the one hand, Esperanza was really wrong. Rude, threatening, making questionable decisions. On the other hand, she's my only daughter, and now I've lost her. The next morning, I woke up to sounds in the yard. Esperanza and Rafael were loading things into cars. They were working in silence, not speaking to each other. I stayed with them, watching from my bedroom window. By noon, they were finished. Rafael said something to his wife, and she nodded. Then he walked up to the house and knocked on the door. I went down and opened it. My son-in-law stood on the threshold with a sad face. Señora Palomita, we are leaving. Esperanza asked me to give you the keys to the house and to the office at the factory. He handed me a bunch of keys. Where are you going? I asked. Mexico City. Esperanza has a friend there, and we're staying with her until we find a job and a place to live. Rafael, if you need anything. You won't need anything, he interrupted. Esperanza was very clear about that. No contact with the family. The son-in-law was silent for a moment, then added, Senora, I understand. I understand that Esperanza was wrong about many things. But you too. You were also too cruel. Life is cruel, Raphael. I was just protecting my interests. Maybe. But the price of that defense was very high. He turned and walked toward the cars. Esperanza sat in the front seat, looking away from the house. Even from a distance, it was obvious that she was crying. The cars pulled away. I stood in the doorway and watched them drive away. At the last moment, Raphael waved at me from the window. Esperanza didn't even look back. When the sound of the engines died down, I went into the house and closed the door. The silence was deafening. For the first time in years, I was completely alone in this big house. Socorro appeared from the kitchen with tearful eyes. Senora Palomita, have they left? Yes, they have left. What will happen now? With the house? Me. I looked at the housekeeper. She'd been with us for 8 years. She was almost family. The house is for sale, Socorro, but I'll make sure the new owners keep you on the job, or I'll find you another place. She nodded, wiping away her tears. Senora, won't Senorita Esperanza? She will come back, won't she? This is temporary, isn't it? I looked at Socorro for a long time, choosing my words. I don't know, Socorro. I honestly don't know. The next day, I went to the factory to say goodbye to the staff. Benito had gathered all the workers in the big workshop. People stood in silence, many with sad faces. They knew the company was for sale and were worried about their future. Friends, I began, I know this is a difficult time for you, but I want to assure you that the new owners have promised to keep all the jobs. The factory will continue to operate as it did under my husband. An old woman in the packing room raised her hand. Mrs. Palomita, what about Mrs. Esperanza? She understood us well, didn't she? Senorita Esperanza no longer works at the factory. She has new plans. The workers looked at each other. It was clear they wanted to ask more, but they didn't dare. After the meeting, I went into the office that used to be Miguel's, then Esperanza's. Now Benito was working here. He was sorting out documents, preparing the transfer to the new owners. How are you, Benito? Difficult, ma'am, but we're doing fine. The new owners make a good impression. They're serious people. They know how to do business. And that contract with Productos del Norte? Benito smiled grimly. Terminated, Senora, just as you and Licenciado Medina predicted. They tried to impose new terms, double the supply, and reduce the price by another 15%. When we refused, they canceled the contract and demanded a fine for breach of duty. And? Nothing. The lawyer proved that their demands were inconsistent with the original contract. But if Senorita Esperanza had agreed to expand production to accommodate their orders, he shook his head. The factory would have gone bankrupt in 6 months. I nodded. So my fears were justified. But I wasn't happy about it, because it had come at too high a price. A month later, the deal was finalized. The new owners, a respectable family company from a neighboring state, officially became the owners of the factory. They left Benito as general manager and promised to develop production without ventures. I bought a small apartment in the center of San Rafael, in an old house with high ceilings and a balcony overlooking the main square. Socorro helped me settle in until the new owners decided whether they needed a housekeeper. Life went on quietly. I went to the market in the mornings, met with Remedios, and read books. The money from the sale allowed me to live comfortably, without thinking about tomorrow. But at night I was tormented by thoughts of Esperanza. Where is she now? Had she found a job? How are she and Rafael doing in a strange city? Weeks passed, months passed, and Esperanza never came to town again. Once in a while news reached me through mutual acquaintances, that she had a new job, that she had moved into a better apartment, that Rafael had also found a good place. I was happy for them, but sad at the same time. My daughter was building a new life without me, and maybe she was right. Now, as I write this story, it has been 3 years since those events. I live alone in my small apartment, talk to friends, read books, sometimes go to the theater. I have money, my health is still good. But still tormented by the question, did I do the right thing? Was it worth it to protect my principles at such an expensive price? Sometimes I think that yes. I protected Miguel's business from ruin, taught an ungrateful daughter. And sometimes I think that I was too cruel, that a mother's love should be higher than all offenses. But there's no turning back the clock. Decisions have been made, Words have been spoken. It remains to live with the consequences and hope that someday, maybe Esperanza will realize that I acted not out of anger, but out of love for the family business. And maybe someday I too will realize that pride is a bad counselor in dealing with an only daughter. But for now, we both live in different cities, in different worlds, harboring resentments and memories of how things could have been different.